Hello and welcome to the Spirit Spa, an online sanctuary dedicated to supporting you if you're in the early stages of recovery from a nervous breakdown. My name is Karen Packwood. I'm an author and spiritual guide. And in today's message from the wilderness, I'm going to be focusing on the theme of isolation. This is my second video, part two of my messages about isolation. In part one, I talked a lot about inner isolation, the inner isolation that we feel at the beginning of a nervous breakdown. So I would suggest that if you haven't watched that one already, that you watch that one first and then come back to watch this one, because this one is going to talk about isolation a little bit further on in our recovery journey. Once we've got past the kind of like the inner isolation, where we're kind of in a very much our own private space and our own private journey with isolation, to the point where we're beginning to think about coming back into contact with other people, particularly people outside of the home, because obviously at the beginning of the journey, if you live with other people, then obviously then there's isolation there in connection with them and dealing with that, but then obviously we also then have to think outside of the home, within work situations and with our friends and family, and also actually meeting strangers as well. So just a little bit about background on my experience. I actually wasn't living with anybody else. I was living on my own. Well, I had a 2-year-old daughter. I was a single mum with a 2-year-old daughter. But actually I was so ill at the beginning of my breakdown that I did actually have to go and live with a relative in order to kind of be looked after and cared for. But right at the very beginning, I have no recollection of communicating with that person. I was, I spent 6 months pretty much comatose in bed, and I really have no recollection of those 6 months. Once I started coming out of that place, as I mentioned in the part 1 video in relation to isolation, my isolation was very, very self-focused. There was such an inner isolation. My energy and my focus was on about inner survival. That was where my focus was going, and that's the case for many people in the early stages. I did have a 2-year-old, and I, at the beginning, the relative that I moved in with had to do an awful lot of caring for my little daughter. But once I was kind of beginning to get up again, obviously I had to really focus on her and make sure that she was okay. So I was able at the beginning and the end of the day to make sure that I was able to get her ready to go to nursery, and to also be there for her for like tea time and so on. And that was where a lot of my energy went in terms of connecting with other people. But outside of that, I was not connecting with anybody. Even the person that I was, the relative's house that I was living in, I don't really think that I spent much time communicating with them very well. I just didn't have the energy. It was very much myself first, my own inner survival, then my daughter's well-being, and then outside of that, it was total collapse. In the part 1 video, I talk about the journey of recovery with my own inner isolation. Of course, I actually then came past that point to wanting and needing to have some kind of connection with other people. But this became quite an interesting experience for me, because I actually began to feel like I didn't fit in with my local community. I didn't fit in with with former friends. I didn't feel like I fitted in with their conversations. I didn't feel like I fitted in with their lifestyle anymore. I didn't feel like I tried to go back to my former job, and that didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I connected there in the same way that I had done before. And the reason for this was because the truth was, I had completely changed. My breakdown had broken me. It had completely changed who I was. The way I was now coming into a place of functioning was extremely difficult. sorry, not difficult, well, it was difficult, but it was extremely different to how I was living my life before. And so, of course, it makes sense now, looking back on it, that of course those friends weren't going to be the friends that were going to be the ones that were going to be my main friends now from now on. My job was not going to be the job that I do now. Of course, those things needed to shift and change. I didn't completely lose all my friends, just to reassure you. There was some of my really kind of like core friends who have kind of stayed with me on the journey, from being so deeply broken, right back to feeling, very well again. And I'm so extremely grateful to those friends for being with me and sticking with me through all the very difficult times. But there were many people who I socialised with that I don't socialise with now. I didn't have big fallings out with them. I just very gradually kind of like changed my way of being and the kinds of people that I mix with and work with. But that wasn't easy. That took time, and it took me going into situations and finding out that they didn't work for me, and realising that I had to actually find different ways. I discovered that I actually had an awful lot of social anxiety. I found it very difficult going into situations and socialising with people, even people who had been very good friends before. And that's partly a reason why some of those friendships kind of dissolved, was because I couldn't explain to those people what was happening and what was going on. They were having conversations that didn't really resonate with the kind of conversations that I needed to have, because I was working at survival level, but equally they didn't understand where I was at either. So there was a natural kind of dissolving of friendships, a natural dissolving of social situations, a natural dissolving of work situations. That was difficult. That was a very lonely time. What was wrong with me that I wasn't able to socialise and function with those people in the same way again? What had happened to me? What happened to my personality? Who was I now? It was a really kind of a journey of exploration into who am I now? Who have I become? What's right for me? And and I felt very bad very bad about myself that I wasn't able to function. I seem to have a helicopter flying over me. Just bear with me while the helicopter's gone. I think that's the air ambulance, actually. I live in a very rural area, and we use the air ambulance. I think it's an air ambulance that's just gone over, actually. So I think it's an air ambulance that's just gone over. So there was a dissolving of old friendships and old work experiences, which took me into a whole new place of isolation, of having to really kind of I really felt bad about myself. I thought, gosh, I must be such a bad person that I can't keep these friendships going, or that I don't belong in these situations anymore. I don't fit in anymore. I felt so ashamed, and I felt like such a failure, until I realised that actually I had changed. I was a different person. I didn't fit in. I needed to find new places to fit in. I needed to find new people, new situations. And for a while I was in a void. I didn't have the courage to go out and meet new people, because I just felt so bad about myself for having the breakdown. I felt so bad about myself for the fact that those former friendships didn't continue. That I just thought, gosh, I'm a really bad person. I don't fit in society anymore. I've completely broken. I'm completely dysfunctional. I'm a really, just a really bad person. I had an awful lot of shame and self-doubt and self-criticism. It was a very difficult time. It was a very difficult time. But then actually, my inner healer, the part of me that knows what is right for me, that knew what was right for me, began to kind of just give me nudges, just very gentle nudges, in directions, places to go, activities to follow, people to talk to. I didn't kind of force it. It just very gently and naturally came to me. New people started coming into my life. new activities started coming into my life. And so it was about having patience. It was about having tolerance. I'm sorry, I think that's another air ambulance that's just come over. Yeah, to send positive thoughts to the people connected with that incident. Yeah. Okay, so it was about having the patience, and it was about trusting that the right people, the new people, you can see that I've actually changed direction. Here I was talking about the past and actually what I had to release and what I had to let go of, and then I talked about how very difficult this was for me, what a lonely place for it was, what, you know, it was self-punitive behavior that I put myself through. And so eventually, and then I've just turned, and like you can see the light behind me, new life, new direction, new people, new friendships, new activities, new work experiences. You know, a whole new life opens up to me as a result of kind of tolerating the awful difficulties that the journey with isolation has taken me on. So it has been, the journey with isolation has been a very long one, and it's been a very difficult one. It's had many difficult feelings, on that pathway. But each one I've come to, I've sat with, I've worked through, I've trusted that it's leading me to something that's much more positive, that's much more authentic, that's much more true to who I'm meant to be, to how I'm meant to be living my life. And I'm absolutely sure that that's the same for you as well. So stick with it. Listen to your inner healer. Listen to your inner wisdom. Listen to your guidance. And remember the question that I always ask when I'm in the really difficult places of the journey of recovery. And that question was and is, if I was to love myself today, what would I do? And when you're really in the heart of that desperate isolation, it's one of the most difficult feelings in the recovery process. Just ask yourself, if I was to love myself, what would I do? And try and honour it. And be so gentle with yourself. Trust that even though this is a slow journey, it's a very positive journey eventually. And you will come out of it, and you will find your way back to the light. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask by emailing me at karenpackwood@gmail.com or leaving comments in the box below. Please like the video if you've liked it. Please subscribe if you would like to subscribe to my channel, and say hello in the comments box below if you do subscribe. I hope that you weren't disturbed too much by the air ambulance. If you were, let me know, and I'll in the comments, and I'll re-record the video. But for some reason, it just kind of felt appropriate to leave it there, because you know, an air ambulance is, you know, like, we need healing. You know, when we're in our recovery journey, you know, we're seeking healing, we're requiring healing, and isolation is for me. Isolation was one of the most desperate places on the journey. The most desolate of places, the most frightening, the most terrifying of places. So I don't know, there's just something about the air ambulance coming in there, like, you know, some healers in the sky above us. It kind of just felt right to carry on recording and to leave the video playing. So, but if it's too disturbing, let me know and I'll re-record the video. But I'm sending you lots of love. I'm Karen Packwood. This is the Spirit Spa, dedicated to supporting you in the early stages of recovery from a nervous breakdown. Sending you lots of love and peace today.